I guess you could say there are a few bugs.
Oh, damn. Sorry.
That's okay, we better start. Hey guys, Morphologist here.
What's up, guys? It's Wasted Space.
And tonight on Patchology, we're doing updates 106 and 107 together because last week we didn't do it, and we thought we'd do it together now.
So yeah, 106 was kind of interesting from a sort of fixes and changes perspective, which is unusual because there's been lots of fixes of late and we've been struggling to talk about them, everyone knows that. But this one in particular had a couple of fixes that were, I don't know, pretty necessary, and the main one in that is the hydrogen tank size changes. Obviously, they introduced the hydrogen tank, and anybody that played with that thing will know that it was pathetically small, like scarily small, to be honest, when you consider that that's maybe what we're going to be using to get off planets. So they increased the size by 4 times, and my opinion is it's still pathetically small.
Indeed, and to refresh your memory, if you didn't join us during the 2-year anniversary live stream, the hydrogen tanks, they expend in 40 seconds. We have them in the game now and you can try it out. However, when we watched the live stream, we noticed that the devs were taking significantly longer than 40 seconds to get out of the gravitational pull of an Earth-sized planet. Well, not Earth-sized, but Earth-type planet, so 1G.
Oh yeah, it was. They were flying a ship that had a hydrogen tank in it, and it's worth mentioning that the 40 seconds thing is it's one large tank, one large thruster. 40 seconds is the duration you'll get. And that's exactly what they were using on the stream, in fact. They had one large tank, one large thruster, and that was basically all the ship was. It was a large tank, a large thruster, and a cockpit on the top. And it took them probably about 12 minutes, in reality, to actually get the whole way out from takeoff. Bit of flapping around, but that's a long distance, so it really sort of starts raising these questions about how hard is it going to be to get off planets? And maybe how important was that ISP thing we mentioned on Patchology recently, which is, this measure of how efficient thrusters are when it comes to lifting weight. And, it was something we mentioned previously had been introduced as one of the sort of background mathematics in the game, is that's now a value that exists within the code. And it's certainly now leading towards that when you look at how essentially powerful but inefficient these hydrogen thrusters are. They produce crazy acceleration to the point where they're almost not usable in space. There's so much acceleration that you're at full speed so quickly it's silly. But then you can imagine that once you get down onto a planet with some gravity, maybe that's where this is all gearing towards.
Indeed, and for those of you who are wondering what the implications of this are, like what it means in terms of spaceship design, it means that you're going to have to really worry about the ratio of thrust, how much you're storing on your ship, what you're going to do once you get out of the gravitational pull of the planet, because you're going to expend your supply if you've done it right. So what are you going to do once you get out? Do you have enough ion thrusters? Who knows? And will atmospheric thrusters play a part? Because we know that they're going to be adding those into the game. They're like turbines, so they don't work in outer space. They only work in atmosphere. So what do those mean for getting yourself out of the gravitational pull of a planet?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, we've already seen in one of the patch teasers the idea of a staged takeoff craft, something that has almost disposable parts that drop off as it goes up because they become useless. And this ties back into that atmospheric thruster idea. You're going to have potentially some hybrid crafts that have bits on them that are useless some of the time, but vital some other points in time. So I think it's all looking pretty cool. It's certainly got this Kerbal Space Program nature to it, but without perhaps quite so much of the hardcore astronomy side of things. Astronomy? Ignore me. That's not right. But yeah,
physics. I would just say physics.
Hardcore physics and mathematics behind it, and a much more approachable way of dealing with it. But in turn, we get something very, very creative out of it at the same time, which is very, very cool.
I think though that it's important to note here that you can get down to the calculations and figure out what the optimal setup for your ship, for the mass of your ship, how much thrust you need, how many hydrogen tanks you need. You can do that, and it will save you time. But if you're not somebody who likes to do math on their free time for having fun, Space Engineers offers the option to not care, and you can just troubleshoot and have fun, which isn't so much the case in Kerbal Space Program, because if you've done it wrong, you just crash and burn horribly. So
yeah, indeed. But moving on to the next one from the list on the 106, because I think they've all got their implications. And the next one is something that's very interesting, because it's basically the claim that they've now fixed Pistons. which I would take with a pinch of salt if you haven't experienced it yet. There is certainly a noticeable change to Pistons. Whether you can call it a fix it depends completely on your perspective.
If you didn't know, just to refresh your memory, pistons work terribly when you're flying very quickly. In the past, if you were flying with something attached to a piston, it would wobble around like spaghetti and then break off and explode. And that wasn't so great, especially if you spent a lot of time building that.
Indeed. So the Space Engineer's solution to that for the time being is to make it so that above a certain speed, and this speed is supposed to be 100 meters a second, pistons will lock into place and they'll behave a bit like landing gear. They'll be incapable of moving. You won't be able to reverse them or any of that stuff. In my experience, however, and this is a mix of multiplayer and single player, that's not quite how it plays out. In reality, pistons have got some, they do behave a bit better, but they've got some new issues that weren't there before. And a lot of this surrounds the idea of the game not seeming to know quite how fast you're travelling, and so sometimes the pistons will lock into place at times where they really shouldn't be, and it just limits you to some extent. You can no longer move pistons when you're moving reliably. And can I say it's actually fixed the problem of pistons and rotors exploding? Probably not. I've been playing with some ships that have got pistons and rotors on them on stream recently, and I've had a fair bit of exploding issues still. But it's a step in the right direction. They're clearly aware of it, and it's clearly a problem that's pretty massive to find a solution to. So maybe this is step one. Who knows? I'm just not 100% convinced by this particular implementation of the pistons fix.
Indeed, but they are working on getting that fixed, and for what it is now, it is better than it was before. Now, I'm not going to jump on the yay, good job, Keen bandwagon like we have been doing in the past, but I will say that I am happy that they've done something about it at the very least, because in the past they've already fixed now the small ship hulking, and what was the other big one aside from small ship hulking? But anyway, they fixed a number of things, and I'm confident they'll get it fixed soon, but we really, in its current condition, it still needs some work. It's not perfect.
Yeah, it's a step in that direction,
Beyond that, we saw that they did some changes to conveyors, which some of you were not happy with, judging by the forums. They removed the windows, and that is supposedly to increase performance in the game, though it does change the way that they look.
Yeah, they were kind of attractive before. Conveyors were always something that, as a vanilla builder, you had the ability to use, especially on large ships in particular, because that's where you got the glass. You had the ability to use them to kind of sort of supplement and kind of build up the look of your ships. But the big gripe that kind of seems to have come out of this particular change was that, to begin with, Keen forgot to remove glass from the new blueprint, or whatever you want to call it, the new block. So you were building something that had no glass in it, but still required you to put glass in it. And then when they changed it and fixed that bit, anybody who had glass invested into conveyors just straight up lost it. It just disappeared and you only got metal back.
And I also believe they didn't update the LOD for a while. I'll have to double check to see if they fixed that as of now, but it was still showing up when you got further away from the conveyors as well.
Oh, it was also true that one of the tutorials, I think it was tutorial 6, which involves building some conveyors, didn't actually work for a little bit. Then again, that might have been fixed now, but it was one of these ones where you had to build certain things, and at the end of the tutorial, you were left over with not enough armor plates and too much glass, because obviously it hadn't quite balanced the reagents there. But I mean, overall, it's nice to see them looking towards the performance aspects of it. I can sacrifice a bit of glass on the conveyors if it means that, for the most part, the game is trying to run better. That's a positive thing. We want those big, epic battles, and if not every conveyor in that big epic battle is shiny and reflecting everything in that big epic battle, that's probably for the best.
And I think it's important that these updates come before planets, because we're going to need conveyors to hook up those tanks to our big thrusters, so, it's going to help out there. But now, why don't we talk about the updates that came out in 107, because there were some things in there that I think are definitely worth talking about. Number one is the introduction of something called a Space Master.
Space Master!
Sounds like something that you would do.
I don't know why Master. Master makes me laugh. There's something
like Game
about
Master.
That. Space Admin. Anything else would have been fine, but for some reason Space Master. But they said it was because they were sort of envisaging it as like a tool a dungeon master.
That's what I was thinking.
The ability to manipulate the game on the fly to try and make things better or introduce new mechanics to the players in your game as you're going. Now, I have to admit, I haven't had full experience of it yet because it's a pretty comprehensive and pretty big tool. There's a lot you can do in there. But I can certainly say it's produced some good results as far as cleaning up trash in the world is concerned. And it's produced some amusing results when, at the end of a 3-hour building session with a couple of other people in the stream, you can switch to the furthest object and find out that the wing of Captain Shack's ship has been flying away for the last 2.5 hours and is now like 100,000 kilometers away off in that direction, still floating away happily. So, yeah, I like it as an implementation. It certainly shows that they're trying to... I get the impression they're trying to implement some stuff like what Midspace has done with SE Toolbox, for example. Some of that functionality back into the game. And I think that's badly needed. Give us more tools to make it good, especially from a multiplayer admin's perspective.
Also, if you're wondering how to pull up that Space Master menu in-game, if you have admin, if you're running the server, or someone gives you admin on a server, you just hit Alt F10 and it'll pop up a screen on your right side where you will be given a number of options. Now, let's talk more about what this actually means, because you were kind of hinting towards what it means for multiplayer servers. You know, you can run events now, basically, which will work. Or you can have, admins that can actually do things aside from just kick people, which is incredibly useful because, the goal is that we want to have big servers in the future. And if we're going to have big servers, we're going to have hackers, we're going to have griefers, and we need some tools. We need some tools to give to our admins to mitigate that issue, at least as best as possible with what, currently we have.
Well, giving someone admin rights on a server now means something. Prior to this, there were no tools, pretty much. So it's very cool to see that, and it seems to offer a sort of dual use perspective where you've got these sort of admin tools that enable you to, as you say, run events and spawn things into the world and just generally manipulate the world in various ways that you could use for scenario perspectives on a multiplayer server or whatever you put your mind to. But then on the flip side, you've also got a whole bunch of tools that, I don't know, they seem very similar to some of the medieval engineers' tools where it's about trash management and keeping track of the stuff that's actually in your world that prior to now you had no idea was even there because it had floated off 2.5 hours ago and you just not know about it.
Yeah, and that's really important, like I said. For when these servers come out, we'll need these tools. So, if there's anything else we want to talk about, it would have to be Cockpit Building here in 107.
Yeah, this was kind of interesting. I wasn't sure what to make of it at first because I wasn't sure why it was there. But I have to admit, this is coming from a perspective where I primarily play creative of late. And so I'm used to this idea that everything builds instantly and you've got none of these constraints that you have in survival. Admittedly, I do build survival-ready ships, but I haven't had to go through the rigmarole of actually building that ship myself. And I think from this, I'm starting to get the idea that that's what this is about. This is about being able to sit inside one of those mule ships that people make, one of those big, weldy, grindy ships with the cargo space. And instead of having to get out of your ship, place a load of blocks down, then get into that thing and go and weld them, you've now got this ability to do it sort of all in one as kind of one seamless experience.
And I think this is going to come really into play when planets come out because, well, we don't know much about how useful the jetpack is. We do know that it's a fuel-based system and that there's not a lot of fuel in your jetpack. You're probably going to want to save that for like a last-ditch effort or for just quick transportation between your different ships or stations and not like a long-term transportation thing. You're probably going to be occupying your ship a lot more often, and therefore, being able to build from your cockpit is really helpful.
Definitely. I've tried to build myself under a natural gravity environment where I strictly said no jetpacks allowed, we're just going to build natural gravity. And it is so frustrating trying to build like that. Constantly having to build ramps to be able to access things, constantly having to mess around in order to be able to get at parts of your ship. And you have to plan the whole build out in a really careful manner just to be able to weld it all up because you can't get at areas because you have to climb up to them and the gravity's annoying, and even with the jetpack it's kind of annoying. So I can kind of now start to see how this might actually be quite an important change, even though it doesn't seem like it yet. That's the sort of bit that's going to make survival on planets and the ability to make some really cool building robot, building vehicle, building ship. It could come in many forms. I think there's some very clever people that play Space Engineers. You could get all sorts of varieties of stuff, but it makes that a viable thing for survival and not just something you can only use with projectors or in creative.
Indeed. Now it looks like we've kind of talked about all the things that have been in these updates, but we do know that planets are coming out, quote unquote, soon, or soon, a trademark. So what we would like to ask you guys is what you would like to see for planets. What's your first thing that you're going to build once you get on planets?
I'd be really intrigued just to see, because everybody's going to have a different approach to this sort of idea, what their first goals are when they land down. So that first project you have, and I'm not thinking, obviously, if you're playing in survival, your first project is going to be, I need a way to mine. Maybe that's the big cool thing you want to make, but look beyond that. Just think that first big project you want, the first thing you're going to say, that's one of my goals. I want to have one of X, whatever it may be. What are you guys going to get up to?
Yep, well, that's it, guys. Thanks again for watching this week's episode of Patchology, and we hope that you'll join us next week. Thanks again, guys.
Yep, one thing I'd like to add just before we finish is that obviously this video has been recorded and presented in a bit of a different style to the ones we've done previously. We kind of felt that doing the two completely different channels, videos on two completely different channels, was all, I don't know, a bit weird, and we'd very much like to come on this as a sort of podcast perspective so that we can do more of this sort of thing, get at more games and do more sort of the speculative stuff as far as Space Engineers is concerned as well. So let us know what you think down below. Is this a big mistake we're making, or is this something you guys are actually fine with and the main deal was listening to us talk anyway? So cheers, guys. Hope you enjoyed it, and we will catch you next time.
See ya!